What is the secret of our exit? He describes the exit taken by the spiritually minded as the world closed in upon them with the secularization of the church under Constantine. That exit led them into the sands of Egypt. They introduced the via negativia, the way of interior denial. Unfortunately, the via negativia cuts dead across the Emmaus road. Yet the via negativia underlay the whole. Please turn the page. Thank you. Medieval way of perfection, which defined the various stages of prayer: purgative, illuminative, unitive. In the latter, ascent. In the latter of ascent. Dr. Nicoleon has the courage to question whether such is even the royal road to holiness within the Christian dispensation. It is not merely a matter, as we have already suggested, of how many earthbound mortals have departed almost completely from a serious prayer life because they thought such the essence of prayer and are benumbed by their failure to attain it. His real doubt is the capacity of such a type of prayer to keep men on what he calls the knife edge between pietism on the one hand and the slide into materialism on the other. So delectable, if demanding, is the exercise of such prayer of inferior denial that they are apt to cut off the telephone when a whole world is trying to get through to them in the extremity of our need. Nonetheless, it is these whom we are inclined to suppose are the truly religious, or the really spiritual. Alternatively, the rest of us, feeling we are not made for it, embrace the practical and slither on the knife-edge walk without sufficient prayer. We dismiss the batam platoon, so constant now is the telephone. We comparably degenerate just at the moment when, if we seriously recovered the pristine holiness, we might have the word for our world. There remain the crossbenchers who become hardly dependable for either school. Now practical, now spiritual, their telephone just ceases to ring. Neither to conduct a retreat or lead a war on want are they fitted. We are immersed in the here and now. We know we must be, but too often, when we turn to prayer, the isolation intensifies, the medieval resurrects, and neither life becomes powerful nor prayer real. Where in this situation do we turn? It is the same question fundamentally that Bernthal is asking, and the answer, I believe, is in the direction he indicated. I suspect we have got to ask very seriously whether we should even begin our thinking about prayer in terms of the times we set aside, whether prayer is primarily something we do in the spaces, in the moments of disengagement from the world. I wonder whether Christian prayer in the light of the Incarnation, is not to be defined in terms of penetration through the world to God, rather than of withdrawal from the world to God. For the moment of revelation is precisely so often, in my experience, the moment of meeting and unconditional engagement. How easily one finds oneself giving pious advice to a person faced with a decision to go away and pray about it. But if I am honest, what enlightenment I have had on decisions has almost always come not when I have gone away and stood back from them, but precisely as I have wrestled through all the most practical pros and cons, usually with other people. And this activity, undertaken by a Christian trusting and expecting that God is there, would seem to be prayer. This can perhaps be put another way by saying that traditional spirituality has placed a premium upon the interior life, regarding this as the spiritual core of man. But Bernthal points out that the Bible knows nothing of such a premium. The heart, in the biblical sense, is not the inward life, but the whole man in relation to God. He goes on to make the telling remark that for the Bible, man lives just as much from outwards to inwards as from inwards to outwards. This I believe to be profoundly true for great numbers of people, probably for the majority. For them, real life is meeting. They are, of course, subject to the rhythm of engagement and disengagement, just as, please turn the page. Thank you. Just as the capacity of the body to function creatively depends upon the quality of its relaxation. Nevertheless, insofar as an assessment is made of our physical capacity and alertness, it is made on the evidence of our waking hours. And for such people, their prayer is in the practice of their trade. The need for times of withdrawal is accepted naturally, but with no pretension that these times are particularly holy, nor will they necessarily be more religious, in the sense that they are devoted to spiritual exercises. They are basically times of standing back, of consolidation, of letting love's roots grow. And these may be fertilized by many different processes of action or inaction. I shouldn't be the last to say that periods of disengagement are not absolutely vital. In fact, I have only been able to write this because of one such period, and this may be allowed to serve as an illustration of how, as it seems to me, they should be related to life. I am one of those who find that all my thinking and writing comes to me through immersion in what I have to do. Indeed, it is largely only literally by the activity of writing, with pen in hand, that I can think at all. And without the constant stimulus of problems to be solved, persons to be helped, pupils to be taught, nothing comes to the surface. Isolate myself from the world, and there is no grist to the mill. But it is equally clear that it is not only the mills of God that grind slowly. Time, space, withdrawal, only from the telephone, is necessary if any fruit is to be brought to perfection. I find that this is a paradigm also for prayer. It is certainly not that disengagement is unnecessary, but that the Pentecostal point, as it were, is in the engagement. To try to clarify the difference, let me speak as a fool in contrast for a moment with my uncle Forbes Robinson, whose letters to his friends so vividly show a lay spirituality really being communicated. Forbes would constantly say, "I am seeing so-and-so. I must put aside an hour first to pray for him." Or even, "I could help him more if I set apart the hour in which I would have seen him to pray for him." This, I find, just doesn't work out in practice. And I am not convinced that it is merely due to my incomparability dinner candle power. My own experience is that I am really praying for people, agonizing with God for them, precisely as I meet them and really give my soul to them. It is then, if ever, in this incarnational relationship, that deep speaks to deep, and the Spirit of God is able to take up our inarticulate groans and turn them into prayer. It is afterwards that I find one needs to withdraw, as it were, to clarify, untell it, and bring to obedience the revelation given on the night. A non-religious understanding of prayer. Perhaps this is the starting point for a non-religious understanding of prayer. We may begin from the fact that people do give themselves to people. There is nothing religious about this, but to open oneself to another unconditionally in love is to be with him in the presence of God, and this is the heart of intercession. To pray for another is to expose both oneself and him to the common ground of our being. It is to see one's concern for him in terms of ultimate concern, to let God into the relationship. Intercession is to be with another at that depth whether in silence, or compassion, or action. It may consist simply in listening, when we take the otherness of the other person most seriously. It may not be talking to God, as though, and the page please, to a third person, about him at all. The thou addressed may be his own thou, but it may be addressed and responded to at such a level that we can only speak of knowing him in God and God in him. Speak of knowing him in God and God in him. It may not be specifically religious. It may not be consciously Christian, but it may be a meeting of Christ in that man, because his humanity is accepted without any reservation. The way through to the vision of the Son of Man and the knowledge of God, which is the heart of contemplative prayer, is thy unconditional love of the neighbor, of the nearest thou to hand. Prayer is the responsibility to meet others with all I have, to be ready to encounter the unconditional in the conditional, to expect to meet God in the lane, not to turn aside from the lane. All else is exercise towards that or reflection in depth upon it. It was on the Damascus road that Saul had his encounter with Christ. It was driven to Arabia by it. He did not have to go to Arabia to seek God, but equally, from Arabia, he returned deepened in the power of the Spirit. There is an inescapable dialectic of engagement and withdrawal, but much depends on which we regard as primary. There is no sense in which a Christian has to turn aside from the world in order to meet God, any more than the Holy of Holies is for him in the sanctuary. But there is a sense in which he has to go into the world in unconditional love in order to meet God, for God is love, and he who does not love does not know God. And this profoundly affects the matter of his prayer. Let us listen again to George MacLeod. And this is where you learn. This is where you read. I'm sorry. Sorry.
What debilitates our prayer life is our presupposition that the pressures of life are on one side while God is on the other side, interested and concerned, but on some other side. With this supposition, when evening comes with an ending to our pressures, we are apt to go eagerly to God, disconcertingly to find a vacuum. We seek to fill the vacuum with spiritual thoughts. The more we try, the more desperate does the situation become, till in effect we say that we are not really the praying type. Thus we begin to lean perilously to one side of the knife edge. There are, of course, evenings when our prayer life is refreshing, but analyzed, they turn out to be the times when the pressures have been so weighty that you have simply had to go with them to God. But this precisely is the recovery of the knife edge. The religious moment flowers from the religious moment flowers from the practical. Of the prayer life too, we can come to say, hereby know we that we are passed from death unto life, because we love the brethren.